One day, Rick Raines was pulling semis out of ditches and rebuilding diesel engines on camera for millions of people. The next, silence. No farewell video. No explanation. The channel kept uploading. The name stayed in the title. But Rick disappeared. When fans started asking questions, the answers they got didn't add up. Something happened inside Murphy Diesel. And the people closest to it aren't talking. Rick Raines didn't get into diesel mechanics because it looked good on camera. He got into it because it was the only world he knew. Before any of the YouTube videos. Before the subscribers. Before the wrecker calls that racked up millions of views. Rick was just a guy who understood heavy equipment the way most people understand their own hands. Naturally. Without thinking twice about it, he didn't go to a 4-year university to learn how a fuel injection system works. He didn't watch tutorial videos. He learned by being there. In the shop. Under the hood. Getting it wrong, figuring out why, and getting it right the next time. That kind of education doesn't come with a certificate. It comes with calluses. And it shows. On camera, Rick had something that most YouTube personalities spend years trying to fake. He had fluency. Real fluency. When he talked about a blown head gasket or a failed turbocharger, he wasn't reading from notes. He wasn't pausing to remember the right word. He already knew. That kind of confidence doesn't perform. It just exists. When Murphy Diesel started putting out content, it wasn't polished. Not even close. The early videos had the production quality of something filmed on a phone in a parking lot, because that's essentially what they were. No professional lighting. No scripted segments. No host who'd been media trained to smile at the right moment. Just Rick. A broken down truck. And an explanation of exactly what went wrong with it. That was enough. The audience found him fast. Not because the algorithm pushed him to the top, but because the people who watched him could verify what he was saying. The core viewership of Murphy Diesel wasn't casual viewers looking for entertainment. It was tradespeople, long-haul truckers, fleet mechanics, guys who'd been working on diesel engines for 20 years and could tell within 30 seconds whether someone actually knew what they were talking about. Rick passed that test every single time. The field recovery videos were what really built the loyalty. Roadside wrecker calls on 18-wheelers. Semis stuck in ditches on interstate highways at 2 in the morning. Equipment failures in remote locations where the nearest shop was 40 miles away. Rick would show up, assess the problem out loud, and walk the viewer through every decision he made in real time. No cuts. No editing out the parts where something didn't go as planned. Just the raw, unscripted process of a skilled tradesman solving a problem under pressure. That's rare. Even on YouTube. Especially on YouTube. By the time Murphy Diesel hit its stride, Rick Raines wasn't just an on-camera personality. He was the channel's credibility. He was the reason a first-time visitor stayed. He was the reason a long-time subscriber came back. His voice, his teaching style, his habit of explaining the why behind every repair, not just the how, turned casual viewers into loyal followers. He was, by every measurable standard, the face of Murphy Diesel. But channels like Murphy Diesel don't just run on mechanical knowledge. They run on relationships. And that's exactly where things started to fracture. Here's the thing most people watching Murphy Diesel never thought to ask. Who actually owned it? Not in a suspicious way. Just as a practical question. Because when you watch a guy like Rick Raines work, when you hear him explain a cracked engine block like he's reading a map he drew himself, the natural assumption is that he's running the show. That it's his channel, his business, his name on the door. But that's not how Murphy Diesel was structured. Murphy Diesel was built around a shop, an actual diesel repair operation. The YouTube channel wasn't created as Rick's personal platform. It was created as a content arm of that business. Which means from day one, there was a separation between the person you saw on screen and the people who controlled what that screen produced. Rick's role, based on everything publicly observable, was on-camera talent. The face, the voice, the mechanical authority that made the content worth watching. Whether he held any ownership stake in the channel itself, any revenue-sharing agreement, or any formal partnership arrangement has never been clearly confirmed by either side. And that ambiguity is not an accident. This structure isn't unique to Murphy Diesel. It's practically a blueprint. Look at almost any successful blue-collar YouTube channel that scaled past 100,000 subscribers, and you'll find the same pattern. One person does the work on camera. Another person, or a small group, manages the money, the brand deals, the upload schedule, the merchandise. The audience bonds with the face. The business belongs to someone else. For a while that works. Everyone gets something they want. But when the channel gets big enough, when real money starts moving, that gap between the face and the owner becomes a fault line. And fault lines don't stay quiet forever. Murphy Diesel grew fast. The kind of growth that changes how people talk to each other in a building. Within a few years, the channel was pulling in hundreds of thousands of subscribers. The content was monetized. Merchandise entered the picture. Brand partnerships became a real conversation. And somewhere in that growth, a question that nobody had bothered to formally answer started mattering a lot more. Who does this actually belong to? Most people watching this had no idea Rick wasn't the channel owner. Did you? Drop it in the comments, because the answer to that one question changes how you see everything that follows. Around the same time the money started getting serious, something else changed. The production quality jumped. Not gradually, noticeably. Better camera angles, tighter editing, more structured video formats. Thumbnails that looked like someone with a graphic design background had touched them. For subscribers who'd been there since the parking lot phone footage days, it felt like a glow-up, like the channel was finally getting what it deserved. But production upgrades don't happen in a vacuum. They happen when someone with a business mindset decides the channel is worth investing in. And when outside investment enters a creative operation, outside influence follows right behind it. The channel was growing. The brand was expanding. And Rick Reigns was still showing up, until quietly he wasn't. There was no goodbye video. No, I'm taking a break post. No pinned comment explaining anything. One week Rick Reigns was on screen, doing what he'd always done, pulling wrecked trucks out of impossible situations, breaking down diesel problems in plain language, being exactly the person the audience had built a habit around watching. And then gradually he wasn't. It didn't happen overnight. That's the part that made it so disorienting for the people who noticed first. Rick's appearances didn't stop sharply, they tapered. He showed up less. Then less than that. Other people started filling more of the frame. New faces. Different voices. The content kept coming. The upload schedule stayed consistent, but something in the texture of the channel had shifted. Longtime subscribers felt it before they could name it. By sometime in 2022, the comment section started filling up with the same question, written 100 different ways. Where's Rick? Haven't seen Wrecker Rick in a while. Everything okay? Why does nobody talk about the fact that Rick isn't in these videos anymore? These weren't isolated comments. They were consistent. Across multiple videos. Across multiple months. The kind of pattern that doesn't happen when someone takes a vacation. It happens when something has actually changed and nobody in charge wants to say so out loud. The channel's response to all of it was studied silence. Comments asking about Rick were ignored. Some were deleted. The few times the channel addressed the topic at all, the answers were vague enough to mean nothing. Redirected. Reframed. Never a straight answer to a straight question. For a channel that had built its entire identity on blue-collar honesty, on a guy who would tell you exactly what was wrong with your truck and exactly why, that silence landed like a verdict. The name Wrecker Rick stayed in the branding, right there in the channel identity, as if the person it referred to was still present, still involved, still part of what Murphy Diesel was selling to its audience. But the person behind that name had become, for all practical purposes, a ghost. Most of what you're about to hear in the next section has never been compiled in one place. Channels that cover stories like this usually stop at the surface. This one doesn't. If that's the kind of research you want more of, you already know what to do. Now, Rick himself did speak. Not in one clean statement. Not in a press release or a formal announcement. But in fragments. Social media posts. Comments he left on his own content. Moments in live streams where the question came up and he didn't fully dodge it. What he said pieced together was this: the split was not his choice. He didn't leave Murphy Diesel. The structure of the situation changed around him. He was careful with his words, deliberate in a way that suggested he was aware of what he could and couldn't say publicly. But the shape of what he described was clear enough. He didn't walk out. He was edged out. Murphy Diesel's version of events, to the extent the channel offered one at all, pointed in a different direction. The framing, when it existed, suggested a natural evolution. A business growing beyond any single person. Nothing personal. Just progress. Put those two accounts side by side, and they don't match. Not in tone. Not in implication. Not in the details each side chose to include or leave out. Both can't be fully true. And the audience, left with no official explanation, was forced to read between lines that neither side had drawn cleanly. There were people in Rick's own comment section who knew more than they were letting on. And eventually, some of them started talking. The Murphy Diesel audience was not the kind of crowd that moves on quietly. These weren't casual viewers who'd stumbled onto the channel looking for background noise. The core base was tradespeople, diesel mechanics, long-haul drivers, veterans, men who'd spent decades in industries where you either knew your stuff or you got exposed fast. They had watched Rick Rains for years precisely because he was one of them. And when something felt wrong, they didn't shrug and click to the next video. They started digging. It began in the comment sections. Small observations at first. Someone pointing out that Rick's name was still in the channel banner, but hadn't appeared on screen in 6 weeks. Someone else noting that the tone of the videos had shifted. Less raw explanation, more structured presentation. The kind of thing you might not notice if you watched casually, but couldn't miss if you'd been there from the beginning. Then it moved to Reddit. Threads started appearing in communities like r/diesel and r/mechanic advice, places where the audience already gathered to talk shop. The posts weren't conspiratorial. They read more like incident reports. Methodical. Specific. People listing timestamps of Rick's last confirmed appearances. Comparing language patterns between older videos and newer ones. Flagging moments where a remaining host referenced past content in ways that subtly rewrote the channel's history. Some of what the community found was speculative. That needs to be said clearly. Not everything posted in a Reddit thread is verified fact, and a significant portion of what circulated in those early discussions was people filling in gaps with their best guesses. But some of it wasn't speculation at all. Business registration records in most U.S. states are publicly accessible documents. Anyone with an internet connection and enough patience can pull them. Members of the community did exactly that. What those records showed, in terms of ownership structure, registered agents, and any changes filed during the period of Rick's disappearance, became part of the conversation. Not as a smoking gun, but as context that the channel itself had never provided. Observable changes on the channel side added more layers. The merchandise store quietly updated. Some older videos were re-edited or had their descriptions changed. The content shifted toward a broader audience, less specialized diesel diagnostics, more general trucking and recovery content that played better to an algorithm. Each of these changes, individually, means nothing. Together, they painted a picture of a brand being deliberately repositioned. A lot of people watching this have worked somewhere, a shop, a company, a crew, where they were the Rick. The one who did the work. The one the customers came back for. The one whose name was on people's lips when something went wrong and needed fixing. And they watched someone else take the credit, the revenue, or the recognition for what they'd spent years building. If that's ever been you, this part of the story hits different. Because what happened in those comment sections wasn't just internet sleuthing. It was people recognizing a pattern they'd lived themselves. The community had done what it could with what was publicly available. They'd built a credible, sourced, methodical case for what appeared to have happened inside Murphy Diesel. But they were working from the outside, reading smoke signals, inferring fire. Fan theories only go so far. Because at some point, Rick himself decided to speak. When Rick Rains finally spoke, he didn't do it the way most people would expect. There was no explosive tell-all. No angry livestream where everything spilled out at once. No call-out post written at midnight and posted before anyone could talk him out of it. Rick is not that kind of person. Anyone who watched him long enough on Murphy Diesel already knew that. He was methodical on a wrecker call. He was methodical in how he handled this too. What he gave the public came in pieces. Social media posts that were careful but not cold. Comments left on his own content, where he engaged with followers who asked directly. A handful of live stream moments where the question surfaced, and he didn't completely redirect it. None of it was a full confession. All of it was signal. The consistent tone across every verified public statement Rick has made since leaving Murphy Diesel is this: measured disappointment. Not rage. Not bitterness in the way that makes someone look unstable. Something quieter than that. The kind of disappointment that comes from a person who gave a significant part of their professional life to something and watched it get restructured around them without their input. He has said, in various forms and across multiple platforms, that the situation was not his choice. That he did not decide to step away. That things changed in ways he had no control over. He has been careful, notably careful, about how specifically he describes those changes, which suggests he is aware of boundaries, legal or otherwise, around what he can say publicly. That carefulness is itself information. Men who leave situations on good terms don't typically measure their words that precisely. They say it was time for something new, and mean it. Rick's phrasing carries the weight of someone who has more to say and has made a conscious decision about how much of it to release. What he has released about his next steps is clearer. Rick moved toward independent content. His own platform, his own name, his own audience relationship, built without a business structure sitting between him and the people watching. The content he chose to focus on independently tracks almost exactly with what made him credible at Murphy Diesel in the first place. Real mechanical work. Real field situations. The same blue-collar fluency, unfiltered by anyone else's brand guidelines. The audience followed. Not every Murphy Diesel subscriber, but enough. The kind of followers who were there for Rick specifically, not for the channel name, not for the production value, not for the merchandise, showed up for him again when he gave them somewhere to go. That tells you something important. It tells you that what Murphy Diesel had, the thing that actually drove its growth and loyalty, was portable. It lived in Rick, not in the logo, not in the shop, not in whoever was managing the upload schedule. When Rick left, he took the credibility with him. And when he set it down somewhere new, people found it immediately. Some details around the specific timeline of his independent launch, and the exact terms under which his Murphy Diesel tenure ended, remain publicly unconfirmed. That needs to be stated plainly. There are gaps in the public record that neither Rick nor Murphy Diesel has filled in completely. This script will not fill them with guesswork. What the verified record shows is enough. A skilled tradesman built something real. The structure around him changed. He lost his place in it without choosing to leave. He rebuilt on his own terms. And the people who had followed him for the work, not the brand, followed him again. But what Murphy Diesel didn't say explains even more. Numbers don't have opinions. They don't take sides. They don't care about anyone's version of events. So look at the numbers. In the period following Rick's disappearance from Murphy Diesel's content, the channel's engagement told a story that no official statement ever did. Subscriber counts, which had been climbing steadily during Rick's peak presence, plateaued. Not collapsed, plateaued. The channel didn't fall off a cliff overnight. But the upward momentum that had defined its growth stalled in a way that correlated directly with the transition period. The comment sections shifted harder than the subscriber count did. Comments on Murphy Diesel videos during Rick's absence split into two visible camps. One group engaged with the new content on its own terms, watched the videos, left technical questions, treated the channel as a continuing resource. The other group, often the louder one, kept pulling the conversation back to the same place. Where is Rick? Why won't anyone address this? This isn't the same channel. Engagement metrics on YouTube, likes relative to views, comment volume, watch time, are not fully public. But the visible layer of audience sentiment, the comments themselves, function as a reliable proxy. And what Murphy Diesel's comment sections showed, consistently and across multiple months, was a fractured audience. Half present, half grieving something they couldn't fully name. The new on-camera personalities the channel introduced were not incompetent. That needs to be said fairly. They knew Diesel. They could explain a repair. They were credible in the technical sense of the word. But credibility has more than one layer. There's the kind that comes from knowing your subject. And there's the kind that comes from years of showing up, being wrong on camera occasionally, working through it honestly, and building a relationship with an audience over time. Rick had both kinds. The newer faces had the first kind. The second kind cannot be transferred. It cannot be rebranded into existence. It has to be earned the slow way, and the Murphy Diesel audience, the core of it, had already given that trust to someone else. That's not a personal attack on anyone who stepped in front of that camera after Rick left. It's just an honest assessment of what they inherited and what they didn't. A lot of channels survive a talent transition. Some even grow through one. Murphy Diesel's challenge was specific. Its identity hadn't been built around a format or a topic. It had been built around a person's particular way of existing on camera. Replicating the format was possible. Replicating the person was not. Murphy Diesel didn't just lose a cast member. It lost the thing that made strangers trust a YouTube channel they found at 11 p.m. while looking up how to bleed a fuel line. Rick Reigns is one person. Murphy Diesel is one channel. But this story is not one story. It's a pattern. And once you see it, you can't stop seeing it across the entire landscape of blue-collar YouTube. The structure is almost always the same. A skilled tradesperson, someone with real, verifiable expertise, ends up in front of a camera. They're natural on it, not because they trained for it, but because they're just being themselves, doing what they've always done. An audience finds them. Trust builds. The channel grows. Money enters the picture. And somewhere in that process, a question that was never formally answered starts to matter enormously. Who does this belong to? The creator economy has no standard answer for that. There are no unions protecting on-camera tradespeople. No standard contracts that guarantee a mechanic, a welder, or a wrecker operator a share of the channel they built with their face and their knowledge. The legal frameworks that exist were designed for traditional media, studios, networks, established entertainment structures. A guy who started filming himself fixing trucks in a shop parking lot doesn't typically have an entertainment lawyer reviewing his agreements before he shakes hands on anything. That gap between the trust an audience places in a person and the legal reality of who owns the platform that person built is where these situations happen. Every time. For anyone watching this who is building something similar right now, a trade channel, a skills-based platform, any content operation where your expertise is the product, the lesson from Rick's situation is not complicated. Get clarity on ownership before the channel is worth fighting over. Not after. Before. Because the handshake agreement that feels fine at 100 subscribers becomes a fault line at 100,000. Blue-collar audiences are loyal. Genuinely, stubbornly loyal, in a way that most other YouTube demographics simply aren't. But that loyalty is attached to the person, not the brand. The moment they sense the person has been replaced by a version of the person, they feel it. They may not say it immediately. They may keep watching for a while out of habit. But eventually they make a quiet decision, and they don't come back. That's not a threat. That's just how trust works when it's real. Rick Reigns built something real. What happened to it after that is a case study in what occurs when the business side of a creative operation moves faster than the agreements holding it together. The question nobody has fully answered, not Rick, not Murphy Diesel, not anyone in between, is whether any of it had to happen this way. That question is still open. The Murphy Diesel situation is one case. But it's not the only one. There are at least 3 other blue-collar channels where the same dynamic played out, same structure, different names, different trades. That investigation is already being built. The next one might surprise you more than this one did.